There are two kinds of books in the world. There are books that entertain, and there are books that give you knowledge. And I became interested in books, knowledge books, about I'd say 40 years ago. And it was when I left the pharmaceutical driven industry or profession, and I started to study natural healing. We were encouraged to read books because a therapy on its own is not of any interest. You need to get a good knowledge of every aspect of health. And I suppose down through the years, as I was learning different therapies, I always thought that the next therapy and the next therapy and the next therapy. So I kept learning all these therapies. But I realized that I really was learning different therapies. But at the end of the day, it all came back to the one solution, and that was the food. 80% is the food that we eat. And a book that really, really got me going, I suppose, really was a book. This is the only person that doesn't need to read this book is anybody who doesn't eat. If you eat, you need to read this book because you need to know what's going on. Because, Felicity Lawrence is a journalist, and she writes did write for The Guardian. And that's where I came across her. When I was over in England, I was studying reflexology, and I came across The Guardian, and there was a heading that said Frankenstein food. So because I was interested in health and healing, I read it, and I just couldn't believe what I was reading, because it was showing me what was going on behind the scenes, behind the label. And the adulteration of food. I mean, it's terrible what happens. Talk about the soil and the environment and people's health, and processing food is terrible. So it said, she said at the back of it here, it says, we no longer trust what we eat. We lurch instead from food scare to food scare, while farming is in crisis around the world. A handful of retailers and food manufacturers exert unprecedented control over what we eat and where we buy it. We have come to depend on processed food that is routinely adulterated. That's so true. And when I was talking about healing the gut, and again, Dr. Natasha Campbell McBride, and any doctor, any scientist, or any professor, or any whatever that's interested in real healing on a very deep level always talks about food is the main thing. And I talked about a handful of companies that are in the supermarkets, and I talked about food fraud and control, and backing away from the pharmaceutical industry. And the reason that it just reminded me of this really is because I was out with a friend of mine last night, and we were having a little bit in-depth conversation about why we do what we do and what started us off. And I just mentioned this book belonging to Felicity. I just said that when I read that book, when I read the article in the paper, which then led me to buy the book, and when I read the book, I just could not believe what I was reading. So that really got me in my home interested, and I backed away from frozen foods, and I backed away from a lot of processed foods, and I just started to tweak things and eliminate an awful lot of unnecessary consumption, really. So as I say, we're talking about it, and I just said that I would just mention it because, your health is your wealth, and food is the foundation for your health. So if you're eating food-like stuff, you're on the road to sickness. If you're eating food with nutrients and life in it, then you'll have life. So let food be your medicine, medicine be your food.